detaching from horrific family legacy. When I say family legacy, I mean all the patterns and belief systems that we adopted from our parents in our childhood, which forms part of our conditioning. And our family legacy repeats itself as patterns through multiple generations when one generation passes the torch to the next one. What are some steps that we can take to become free from our family legacy? The first step is to become aware of dysfunctional patterns in our life that manifests and that were also manifesting in our family life when we were interacting with our parents, and also how our parents were interacting with each other as well. Let's look at my example. My masculine side had been suppressed in my life. I felt guilty because of what happened between my mother and my father. My father was violent, alcoholic, narcissistic, very abusive, not available most of the time, physically and emotionally. This experience of masculinity was very toxic for me, very immature, very wounded. And it was for me the only masculinity that I experienced. It was the most accessible version of masculinity for me to experience and later model, because I did not want to become this toxic version of this masculinity. I decided to distance from it. And that also meant distancing from true, healthy masculinity, because I equalized this toxic manifestation of masculinity as the masculinity. And yes, I distanced myself also from true, healthy masculinity. So I became like this castrated, weakling version of boy / upcoming man, as my father was, as was his father, as were my uncles, as was my mother's stepfather, as was my great-grandfather, and also my cousins as well. So for me, acting safe, thinking how not to hurt others, people-pleasing became my thing. Playing safe, avoiding conflicts as well, so I would not get rejected. And there was a deep abandonment wound due to father not showing up. And I rejected my own masculinity. We often reject ourselves so we can form connection with our rejector, the person who rejects us. So we have a common ground. In this way, I tried to not only please my father, but also my mother as well, by being a nice guy, being a safe guy to be around, that who wouldn't hurt others, like my father did. My father lived like an incapable version of man who was very dependent on support of surrounding women. He was not a provider. Basically, he was like a man-child who rarely contributed to the household needs, avoiding responsibility, of course. And his father was similar. And this was the way how they received and demanded attention from women, by becoming weak. And it's like when a child is sick or weak, it's like an extreme case that naturally demands attention from its parent, in this case from a woman. And this was the way how my father, his father, and other men in my family manipulated women, doing most of the load, so to say. Basically, that was a manifestation of shadow or opposite side of healthy masculinity, as you can see. And it was very inadequate energy exchange between man and a woman in a relationship, where often woman would do the most by embodying more masculine energy. And that was my role model. My mother, on the other hand, wanted me to promise that, wanted promise from me, a little boy. At that time, I could have 7, 8, maybe 9 years age. She wanted me to promise her that I would never hurt a woman like my father did. The paradox is that even though I wanted not to repeat that, and I promised my mother, later in life I managed to hurt women in my life. And on a conscious level, you look at the toxic behavior and you make a decision not to do that, not to repeat that. But on a subconscious level, there is already an imprint of toxic pattern, which will repeat and manifest in our life until we become aware of it and we heal our parts that are responsible for playing out this pattern. For me, it didn't matter that growing up I hated my father for what he had done to me, to my mother, to my sister. I would still repeat his pattern in my life because I copied him as a role model deep in my subconscious. There was part of me exactly like him. And it's true that what we hate is also inside us. So if we keep hating, we continue to add resistance to what we hate. And in this context, we add resistance to part of us that is also part of us by continually pushing it further and further away and we don't want to see it, that it's inside of us. And distraction is name of the game for us often. And distraction goes hand in hand with self-hatred, because we hate this part of us. And quite frankly, it's violence against self. That's not self-love. It is very important for us to work on suppression of our essence, whether it's masculine or feminine, to get really healthy, because this is where our true power lies. And in my life, the suppression of my masculine essence on one hand manifested as inner hysteria, as fears of failure, fears of inadequacy, which resonated with my father, his patterns that I adopted by staying weak. And on the other hand, suppression of my masculine essence also manifested as suppressed anger, which indicated a deep, deep desire to break free from this weakling state. So I could finally start realizing my potential. Why am I here on this planet? Stepping in my power, fully expressing healthy masculinity. What I just described is an internal conflict between opposing, conflicting parts of me, which creates resistance within me. And this resistance is to what I want consciously. So if we won't resolve this, we will continue to struggle in becoming healthier versions of ourselves. And yes, we might do opposite of what our unhealthy parent patterns did, which helps to recondition our body and our mind to be different. But that is relatively still a surface level, an external thing. And most likely we will still struggle at some point in our lives, and the unhealthy pattern of our parent will likely to manifest, reappear in our life in some way, shape, or form. Step 2 is about involving these conflicting parts and to create some kind of resolution between them, so there is no more an inner conflict. We would need a resolution between a part that wants to remain adopted parent unhealthy patterns, and on the other side is a part that wants to express in a genuine, authentic way, that wants to break free from this old adopted parent pattern, wants to move on. So a good thing that can help resolving inner conflicts is shadow work. Step 3 is called boundaries. we often need to separate ourselves from our parent so we can shed off all the damaging ideas he or she passed to us, and set ourselves free from them, from our parents. And we'll find that once we distance ourselves from our parent, mentally, emotionally, often physically, we can start to learn how to be ourselves again. And only then we can make peace with them. And only then we can truly start to embody our divine, masculine and feminine within us. And it is also energetically to cut off from contact with our parent when we want to heal these unhealthy patterns, because if we are in a contact, it doesn't matter physical or remote, while communicating to them, we are exposed to the old consciousness, to the old patterns that we want to break free from. And embody new ones. So distance and separation and boundaries give us opportunity to let go of toxic parent patterns, and it frees up space for us to start embodying a new behavior for us. So in this case, boundaries does not mean resistance to mending our relationship with our father or mother. It creates space for us where we can start embodying the opposite behavior and thinking from the old unhealthy pattern. Third step of taking different physical action than before works better when step 2 has been done already. When the inner conflict has been resolved, the inner resistance has been resolved for the embodiment of the new. So we can build on top of that by setting boundaries and by starting to act differently, starting to make different choices in our life. And sometimes people decide to change their names and their surnames so they could completely detach from their family legacy and lineage, to step out from all this toxic patterns as well. I just mentioned keeping distance, separation, boundaries, no contact. But what about forgiveness? Aren't we supposed to forgive our parents? I'll say that real and true forgiveness is a natural byproduct of us becoming healed first. So true forgiveness cannot happen at will. Willpower won't cut it. But often people try to force themselves to forgive others. That's not natural. That comes from the place of our pretentious ego, from our spiritual ego that wants to look superior and follow some of the virtue signaling from other people in spiritual circles. But what it does is adding even more subconscious resistance to our healing, which is contributing more to self-hate rather than self-love. Often our infantile behavior as adults come from the fact that as children we didn't have a matured, healthy, masculine and feminine embodiment in our parents. So there is no wonder why we struggle with the same thing. Thank you for listening and watching this video, and feel free to comment or ask any questions if you have. I would love to know your experience, and I see you in the next video.